The morning was soft and quiet. Light slipped gently through the thin curtains, falling across the small room like a warm blanket. The sound of a clock ticked in the corner, steady, patient, as if reminding time to keep moving even when life felt stuck. Somewhere outside, a bird sang, its voice faint but hopeful. She sat in her wheelchair near the window. Her body was still, fragile, but her eyes were alive. She watched the sunlight, wishing she could walk into it, stretch her arms, and feel the grass beneath her feet again. She was 17, young in years but carrying a weight too heavy for someone her age. Paralysis had locked her world into silence, yet her heart was restless. The door creaked open, slow and careful, as if someone did not want to break the peace of the morning. He stepped inside, her caregiver, her older friend, the one who had been with her since the accident. His presence filled the room, not loud, not heavy, but steady, like the hum of the fridge in the background or the faint clink of cups he carried in his hands. "Morning," he said softly, his voice low and warm. She turned her head, her lips forming the smallest of smiles. "Morning." He placed a cup of coffee on the small table beside her. The smell drifted into the air, rich and comforting. He always brought coffee for himself, tea for her. It had become their little ritual, their small act of normal life in a world that no longer felt normal. The clock ticked. The room breathed in silence. Yet between them, something invisible stirred, like a quiet river beneath the earth, unseen but powerful. "How did you sleep?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. Her eyes lowered, her fingers pressing against the edge of the armrest. "I don't remember. Sometimes it feels like I don't sleep at all, just close my eyes and the night disappears." He nodded. "Dreams will come back. Maybe not now, but one day." She looked at him. His face carried lines of age, not too many, but enough to show a life lived. His eyes were kind, always steady, but sometimes, just sometimes, there was something else in them. Something he never said. The tea steamed softly between them, a faint hiss in the quiet room. She watched him lift his coffee, the way his fingers curled around the cup, the way his lips touched the edge. For a moment she wondered what it would feel like to touch his hand, to feel the warmth of his skin against hers. Her thought startled her. She looked away quickly, her cheeks warming, though she told herself it was only the sunlight. He noticed her silence. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said quickly, maybe too quickly. Then softer. "I just feel restless." He leaned back, in his chair, the wood creaking softly beneath him. His eyes lingered on her longer than they should have. There was something about her, her strength hidden in her weakness, her eyes that spoke louder than words, that pulled at him in ways he could not explain. "You're stronger than you think," he said finally. Her lips curved into a half smile. "You always say that." "Because it's true." The air between them felt warmer, heavier. The silence that followed was not empty but charged, full of words neither dared to speak. Outside, the bird sang again, its notes bright against the ticking clock. She wanted to ask him something dangerous, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she said, "Do you ever get tired of being here with me?" His eyes widened slightly. "No, never." "Why?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. He set his coffee down, leaning forward just a little, close enough that she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, close enough that the soft sound of his breath reached her ears. "Because this is where I want to be." Her heart beat faster, though her body remained still. She felt the weight of his words press into her chest, filling a space that had been empty for too long. The clock ticked again. The tea had grown cooler, yet neither of them moved. She looked down, trying to hide the small tremble of her lips. "You make it sound like something more." His gaze held hers, steady, deep, unreadable. A pause stretched between them, heavy with meaning. Then finally he smiled gently, breaking the tension without breaking the truth hidden inside it. "Maybe it is," he said quietly. Her breath caught. The room felt different now, still the same ticking clock, the same soft morning light, but charged with something new, something unspoken, something dangerous. And in that silence, she realized the morning was no longer just silence. It was a beginning. The day moved slowly. Afternoon light spilled into the room, softer now, painting long shadows across the floor. The sound of the clock still ticked in its steady rhythm, but now it felt like a heartbeat in the silence, reminding them both that time was still passing, even though their world seemed frozen. She sat by the window, her wheelchair angled so she could watch the branches outside sway in the faint wind. The glass reflected her face, young, delicate, but carrying a sadness far older. She touched the window with her fingertips, though she could not feel its cool surface. Her eyes lowered, and she whispered to herself, "Sometimes I think the world has forgotten me." He entered quietly, carrying a folded blanket in his arms. The faint sound of the fabric brushing against his hands broke the stillness. His steps were steady, soft as though he never wanted to disturb her fragile peace. "I haven't forgotten," he said gently, his voice low and certain. She turned, startled, though her lips curved with the smallest smile. "You always appear at the right time." "Maybe I just listen more than others," he replied, moving closer. He placed the blanket across her lap, smoothing it carefully. His hand lingered just a second too long, the warmth of his palm brushing against her still legs. For her, the touch was faint, almost imagined, but it sent a wave of heat through her chest, a flutter that startled her. The silence that followed was not awkward but charged, alive with something both beautiful and forbidden. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "Why do you care so much? Most people—" "They left after the accident." His jaw tightened. "Because you matter. More than you know." For a moment, neither moved. The only sounds were the ticking clock, the whisper of the wind outside, and the faint clink of his watch against the armrest as he adjusted the blanket. Then, almost without thinking, she lifted her hand. Slow, hesitant, trembling. She reached toward him, not fully, not with certainty, but as if testing the air between them. He noticed his eyes softening, and he leaned slightly closer, letting his hand meet hers halfway. The tips of their fingers brushed. It was a small thing, barely, a touch. Yet in that moment it felt like the world shifted. The silence deepened. The hum of the house grew louder, the clocks ticking faster. Her heart pounded in her chest, though her body remained still. She whispered, "I can't feel much, but I can feel this." His breath caught. He should have pulled back, but he didn't. Instead, he let his fingers stay against hers, light and trembling. Her voice was softer now, almost fragile. "It feels like life again." He swallowed hard, fighting the storm inside him. He was supposed to be her strength, her anchor, not this. And yet, here he was, unable to let go. "Sometimes," he said, his voice low, almost breaking, "the smallest touch can mean everything." Their eyes locked. In her gaze he saw longing, pure, desperate, unspoken. In his, she saw the same, though buried beneath restraint. The moment stretched, fragile as glass. A single word could shatter it, but neither spoke. Outside, the wind grew stronger, rattling the window slightly, like nature itself reminding them of the danger of this closeness. Yet they didn't move away. She let out a small laugh, nervous but sweet. "If anyone saw this, they'd never understand." He smiled faintly, though sadness hid behind it. "Maybe it's not for anyone else to understand." Their hands lingered longer, the warmth between them undeniable. The world outside continued, birds flying, cars passing, life moving. But in this small room, time had slowed, narrowed down to this single connection. Finally, he pulled his hand back, gently, as though breaking something fragile. The air felt colder without his touch. She looked away, her eyes moist, though she tried to hide it. Don't disappear now. I don't think I could bear it. I won't, he said firmly. Not now, not ever. The words hung, heavy, more promise than comfort. He sat beside her, their silence no longer empty but filled with the weight of what had just happened. The faint hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, even the whisper of their breathing blended into a soundscape that felt almost like music, soft, slow, intimate. Her lips parted as if to speak, but she stopped herself. Instead, she whispered, "Today feels different." "It is different," he replied, his voice low, steady, and dangerous. She smiled faintly, eyes glimmering with something she couldn't hide anymore. "Then maybe tomorrow will be too." The clock ticked. The blanket lay warm on her lap. And though nothing more happened, everything had already changed. The night was quiet, wrapped in shadows and soft sounds. The clock still ticked in the corner, slower now, almost like a heartbeat stretched by silence. Outside, the wind had calmed, and the world seemed to hold its breath. She sat in her chair, near the dim lamp, the soft yellow glow painting her face with gentle light. A book rested on her lap, unopened. Her eyes were not on the pages but on the doorway, waiting. When he entered, the wooden floor creaked softly under his steps. He carried nothing this time, no blanket, no cup, only himself. His presence filled the room, not loud but steady, like a warmth she had been waiting for. "You're still awake," he said, his voice low. "I couldn't sleep," she replied softly. "The silence feels heavier at night." He moved closer, pulling the chair beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. The lamp hummed faintly, the sound almost hidden but there, like the room's own whisper. She turned her head toward him. "Do you ever feel like there are words trapped inside you? Words you can't say?" His chest tightened. He knew exactly what she meant. "Every day," he admitted. Her lips parted slightly, her breath catching. "Me too." The air between them thickened, not with noise but with meaning. Their eyes met, and in that gaze 1,000 unspoken sentences passed, sentences that neither dared to release into the world. He leaned back slightly, as though distance might save him, but the closeness was already there, woven into their silences, stitched into their breaths. "You've been so quiet since this afternoon," she said finally. He looked down at his hands, strong but trembling slightly. "I've been thinking." "About?" He hesitated. The ticking clock filled the pause. "About us." Her heart raced. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was too heavy. "Us?" she repeated, her voice soft, questioning. "Yes." His eyes lifted, meeting hers with a steady gaze that hid nothing. "What happened today? It wasn't nothing." Her cheeks warmed. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. "I know," she whispered. The silence that followed was thick, almost unbearable. Neither moved. The lamp's light flickered faintly, as if the room itself was alive, listening. She wanted to say more. She wanted to tell him about the way her heart had leapt, the way her chest had burned with a feeling she hadn't felt in so long. But the words stayed inside, caught between fear and longing. Instead, she laughed softly, though her voice trembled. "We're both cowards, aren't we?" He smiled faintly, a sad curve of his lips. "Maybe, or maybe we're just careful." Her eyes softened. "Careful doesn't make the feeling go away." The hum of the lamp grew louder in the silence. Or maybe it only felt louder because their hearts were too full. She lowered her gaze. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be more than this. Just a girl in a chair waiting for the world to pass." He leaned forward, his voice firm, filled with quiet intensity. "You're not just that. You never were. You're more than anyone I've ever known." Her eyes shimmered. The truth in his tone cut deeper than any confession could. She wanted to hold his hand again, to feel that fleeting warmth, but she stayed still. "Do you realize what you're saying?" she asked softly. "Yes," he replied without hesitation, and yet after that one word he stopped. No more. The silence returned, heavy, dangerous, yet strangely comforting. She smiled sadly. "You say just enough to make me wonder. And then you stop." He exhaled, his breath slow, almost shaky. "Because if I say more, I may not be able to stop." Her heart pounded, her lips trembled. The words hovered at the edge of her mouth, but she swallowed them back. The room was full of sentences neither could finish. Finally, she whispered, "Maybe some things are better left unsaid." "Maybe," he agreed softly, but his eyes betrayed him, burning with everything he couldn't say. The clock ticked louder, filling the silence they refused to break. The book on her lap slipped slightly, its pages whispering as they fanned open like a reminder of stories untold. He reached forward instinctively, steadying the book before it fell. His hand brushed hers again, just a touch, quick but enough, to remind them both of the afternoon. Neither spoke. The silence after the touch was louder than any words. Finally, he stood, his chair scraping softly against the floor. "You should rest," she nodded, though her eyes begged him to stay. "Will you be here in the morning?" "Yes," he said, and with that promise, he turned toward the door. As the door clicked shut, the room sank back into silence. But inside, her chest and inside his heart, the silence was anything but empty. It was full, overflowing with words they could not yet say. The evening sky stretched wide, painted in shades of gray and gold. Rain tapped softly against the window, each drop like a gentle knock on the glass. The sound filled the room with a quiet rhythm, steady and soothing, yet carrying a weight of loneliness. She sat close to the window, her wheelchair angled so she could watch the world outside. The streets shimmered wet, tiny rivers chasing each other along the road. She pressed her hand against the window, tracing the drops with her eyes, wishing she could feel their cold touch. He entered quietly, carrying nothing this time. His footsteps were slow, careful, as if the silence itself was sacred. The faint rustle of his jacket, the soft sound of his breath, these were the small details that filled the air around her. "You like the rain?" he asked gently. She smiled faintly, her voice soft. "I love it. It feels alive even when I don't." The words pierced him, simple yet heavy. He walked closer, pulling the chair beside her. For a while, they both just listened. The rain, the ticking clock, the distant hum of passing cars. Finally she spoke, her eyes still fixed on the window. "Sometimes I dream of standing in the rain again, letting it soak through my clothes, feeling it run down my skin. Do you think I'll ever have that again?" He didn't answer at once. He looked at her, at the curve of her face in the soft light, at the longing in her eyes. "Maybe not in the same way," he said softly, "but there are other ways to feel alive." She turned to him, her eyes catching his. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. "What do you mean?" she whispered. His lips curved faintly, though his voice trembled. "I mean, sometimes being close to someone can feel more alive than anything else." Her chest tightened. The rain outside grew heavier, pattering faster, as if echoing the quickening of her heart. She laughed softly, nervously. "That sounds like something dangerous." "Maybe it is," he admitted. The silence that followed was heavy, yet not uncomfortable. It was filled with longing, with everything neither of them dared to say. He leaned closer, his hand brushing the edge of her armrest as though searching for courage. She felt the warmth of him near, and though she could not move closer herself, her eyes begged him not to pull away. "Do you ever think of us differently?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely above the rain. The question hung in the air like lightning before thunder. His breath caught. He should have looked away, but he didn't. Instead, He let his gaze stay on hers, steady, searching. "Yes," he said finally, his voice low and almost broken. Her lips parted. She had wanted to hear it, yet the reality of it shook her. "And, do you regret that?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I don't." The rain tapped harder, filling the silence that followed. Her heart raced, every beat echoing in her ears. She whispered, "Then what do we do now?" He leaned back slightly, though his eyes never left her. "We do nothing," he said. "Because the moment we do something, everything changes." Her chest ached at his words, torn between relief and sorrow. "Everything already changed," she whispered. He closed his eyes for a moment, as though her words had struck deeper than he could bear. When he opened them again, there was fire there, soft, hidden, but undeniable. He reached forward, gently taking her hand. His touch was light, almost trembling, but firm enough that she felt it. Her voice broke. "You don't know what this means to me." "I do," he said. His thumb brushed against her hand, slow, tender. "It means the same to me." The rain softened again, easing into a calmer rhythm, as though the storm outside had found peace in their storm inside. For a long while they said nothing more. The soundscape of the room carried their silence, the rain's patter, the clock's tick, the faint sound of their breaths. She leaned her head against the side of the chair, eyes still locked on him. "If love is forbidden, why does it feel so right?" He had no answer. His silence was an answer of its own, and in that silence, with the rain as their witness, their longing deepened, dangerous, undeniable, and utterly theirs. The evening fire crackled softly in the small room, its glow casting golden light on the walls. Shadows moved gently across the floor, dancing in rhythm with the flames. The faint sound of rain had faded outside, replaced now by the quiet hum of the night. She sat wrapped in a blanket, her wheelchair pulled close to the warmth. The soft fabric brushed against her arms, the heat of the fire touching her face. Across from her, he sat in a wooden chair, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. For a while, they said nothing. The fire spoke for them, popping and sighing, filling the silence with a strange comfort. Then she broke the quiet with a small laugh. "Do you remember the first time you tried to cook for me?" He groaned, hiding his face in his hands. "Please don't remind me. That was a disaster." Her laugh grew, light and free. "You nearly set the pan on fire. And yet you still ate it," he replied, smiling through his embarrassment. "Because you look so proud," she teased, her eyes glimmering in the firelight. Their laughter faded into quiet, but the warmth lingered. She looked at him, her smile softening into something else, something deeper. "It's moments like that make me forget I'm broken." His smile disappeared. He straightened, his voice low and firm. "You're not broken." She held his gaze, her throat tightening. "You always say that." "Because it's the truth," he said, his eyes burning with intensity. The fire cracked louder, filling the pause between them. The silence that followed was not empty. It carried weight, charged with something neither dared to name. She shifted, slightly in her chair, the blanket sliding down a little. He reached out instinctively, pulling it back over her shoulders. His hand brushed against her arm, slow, lingering. She froze, not because of fear, but because of the sudden rush of heat in her chest. His hand lingered a moment longer than it should have. The silence grew heavier. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire, the faint rustle of fabric, and the quiet rhythm of their breaths. Finally, she whispered, "You didn't have to do that." He pulled back slightly, though his eyes never left hers. "I wanted to." Her lips trembled, forming a small smile that didn't hide the storm inside her. "You make it hard to pretend." His chest rose and fell slowly. "Pretend what?" "That this is only care, only kindness." The words hung in the air, sharp and fragile. He looked at her, his eyes searching, his mouth opening as if to speak. But then he stopped. The silence that followed was louder than anything they could have said. She leaned forward just a little, her eyes locked on him. "Why don't you say it?" "Because once I do," he whispered, "we can never go back." Her heart pounded, her throat dry. "And if I don't want to go back?" The fire popped again, throwing sparks that faded before they touched the ground. The room was filled with warmth, but the heat between them was stronger, sharper, more dangerous. He reached for her hand, slowly, as if asking permission without words. She let him. Their fingers touched, then entwined, the silence around them, breaking not with sound but with meaning. Her breath caught. She wanted to speak, to tell him everything burning inside her, but the words felt too heavy, too dangerous. So she let silence speak for her. Their hands stayed together, unmoving but alive. Every heartbeat echoed in her chest. Every breath a confession left unsaid. Finally he whispered, "This silence, it feels more dangerous than words." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Maybe silence is our language." They sat like that, hand in hand, the fire crackling, the night humming outside. No promises, no confessions, only silence, charged, alive, impossible to ignore. And in that silence, they both knew the truth. The line between them was already gone. The house was quiet, wrapped in the stillness of midnight. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and damp. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock, slow and steady, as though marking each breath they took. She sat, in her chair near the dim lamp, the light soft and golden, painting shadows across the room. Her eyes were tired, but her heart was restless. She had not asked him to stay late, yet he was still there, sitting across from her, his presence as steady as the night itself. "You should go," she whispered, though her voice lacked strength. "I should," he replied, his tone low, calm. Yet he did not move. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they had not said. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on her, as though she was the only thing in the world worth watching. Her chest rose slowly, her breath soft but uneven. "Why do you always stay?" He hesitated, his lips parting, but the words came, out quieter than he intended. "Because I can't leave." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She looked down, her fingers twisting the edge of her blanket. "You make it sound like—" She stopped, unable to finish. "Like what?" He asked gently, her eyes lifted to meet his. "Like there's more between us." The silence that followed was louder than any answer. The ticking clock filled it, the lamp's faint hum adding to the weight of the moment. He rose from his chair slowly, each step toward her measured, careful, but unstoppable. He crouched beside her, his face close, his presence overwhelming. "There is more," he whispered finally. Her breath caught. She wanted to move, to pull him closer, but her body betrayed her, still and unyielding. All she could do was meet his gaze, her eyes trembling with the weight of everything she felt. He reached for her hand, lifting it gently, holding it as if it were fragile glass. His thumb brushed her skin, slow and tender, and she felt warmth spread through her chest. "You know this is wrong," she said softly, though her voice was weak, unconvincing. "I know," he admitted. His voice broke slightly. "But wrong has never felt so right." Her lips trembled, a tear slipping from the corner of her eye. He caught it with his finger, his touch gentle, almost reverent. The silence deepened. He leaned closer, so close, she could hear the faint sound of his breath, feel the heat of him beside her. Her voice was a whisper, shaky but daring. "You know what happens next." He closed his eyes for a moment, fighting himself, then opened them again, his gaze locked on hers. "Yes," he said, his voice almost breaking. The lamp flickered, the shadows swayed, the clock ticked louder, as if time itself leaned in to witness what neither of them dared to name. He lifted her gently, his arms strong yet careful, carrying her from the chair to her bed. The faint rustle of fabric, the creak of the mattress, the soft sigh that escaped her lips, all blended into a soundscape of intimacy. He laid her down slowly, as if afraid she might break. His hands lingered, his face close, too close. There, breaths mingled in the silence, their eyes locked in a gaze that spoke louder than words. She whispered again, her voice trembling but certain. And we didn't stop there. The room grew still, the silence almost unbearable, filled with everything unspoken, everything forbidden, everything real. The clock ticked on, the lamp hummed faintly, and in that night they crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The morning light crept through the curtains, soft and pale, touching the edges of the room. The rain had gone, leaving the air fresh and still. The only sound was the faint clink of a cup as he poured coffee, the rich smell drifting through the quiet house. She lay in her bed, awake but unmoving, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. Her chest rose slowly with each breath, her thoughts louder than the world around her. The night before lingered in her mind like a shadow she could not escape. The door opened gently. He stepped inside, carrying a cup of tea. His steps were careful, quieter than usual, as though the silence between them was fragile glass that might shatter. "Morning," he said softly. Her eyes moved to him. She forced a small smile. "Morning." He placed the cup on the bedside table, the faint clink echoing. In the stillness, for a moment neither spoke. The hum of the fridge down the hall, the distant tick of the clock, the soft sound of their breaths. These were the only voices in the room. Finally, she whispered, "It feels different today." His jaw tightened. He lowered himself into the chair beside her, his hands clasping together as if holding something back. "It is different." Her throat ached with unsaid words. She turned her head toward him, her eyes searching his face. "Do you regret it?" He looked at her, his gaze deep, steady, almost pained. "No." He paused, then added softer, "But I'm afraid of what comes next." Her chest tightened. "Afraid of me?" "Afraid of us," he admitted. The silence stretched, heavier than before. She turned her face toward the window where sunlight danced faintly on the glass. "I should feel ashamed," she whispered, "but I don't. Not with you." His hand twitched as if wanting to reach for hers, but he held back. "Last night, it wasn't planned. It wasn't something we should have done. But it happened, and I can't pretend it didn't." Her lips trembled. "We didn't stop there, did we?" His breath caught. He shook his head slowly. "No." Her eyes glimmered with tears she tried to hide. "Then what does that make us?" The clock ticked loudly, each second pressing into the silence. He leaned closer, his voice low, almost breaking. "It makes us two people who wanted something they shouldn't. Two people who found comfort where the world says they shouldn't. Look." She swallowed hard, her voice shaking. "It makes us alive again." His eyes softened. He reached out, finally letting his hand rest on hers. Their fingers touched, tentative at first, then held, as though both feared letting go. "Do you ever wish," she whispered, "that the world would just disappear? That it would be only us?" He closed his eyes for a moment. Every day. The tea on the table grew cold, the coffee in his cup no longer steamed, yet neither moved, their silence too thick, their connection too raw. She let out a small laugh, though it was weak, almost broken. "We sound like a story that doesn't end well." "Maybe we are," he admitted. "But I don't care," she said quickly, her voice sharp with longing. "Even if it ends badly, I don't care, because for once, I feel like I'm more than this chair, more than this broken body. With you, I feel like myself again." His throat tightened. He squeezed her hand gently, his eyes locked on hers. "You're not broken. You never were. And if this, whatever this is, makes you feel alive, then I can't regret it. The clock ticked on. The world outside carried on as if nothing had happened. But in that small room, everything had changed. Finally, he stood, pulling his hand away slowly, reluctantly. I should go, just for a while. Her chest tightened, panic flashing in her eyes. Don't leave me. He shook his head, his voice low. I'll come back. I always come back. Her lips curved into a sad smile. That's what I'm afraid of. He turned toward the door, his footsteps soft but final. The door clicked shut, leaving her alone with the quiet. She lay back against the pillow, her heart racing, her thoughts loud. The silence of the morning pressed in, not empty but full of what they had done, full of what they could never say aloud. And as the clock ticked, steady and unrelenting, she realized the storm was not outside anymore. It was inside them both, and it had only just begun. The day was quiet, almost too quiet. Morning light spilled gently through the curtains, painting soft stripes across the floor. The familiar ticking of the clock filled the silence, steady, unchanging, as though mocking how much had already changed between them. She sat in her chair near the window, her hands folded on her lap, her eyes distant. Outside, children laughed faintly in the distance, their voices carried by the wind. The sound cut her like glass. It reminded her of a world she no longer belonged to. The door creaked open, and he stepped inside. His footsteps were slower than usual, heavy, reluctant. In his hand he carried nothing. Not coffee, not tea, only the weight of what needed to be said. She turned her head toward him, her eyes already knowing. You're leaving. His throat tightened. He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the floor. It's better this way. Her lips parted, trembling. Better for who? For you? He whispered. Silence filled the room. The clock ticked louder. The faint hum of the fridge down the hall joined the stillness. Every sound seemed sharper, clearer, as though the world itself wanted her to remember this moment forever. Her voice broke the silence, soft but sharp. Don't decide for me. You don't get to walk away like last night meant nothing. He flinched at her words, his chest heavy with guilt. He moved closer, crouching beside her, his eyes searching hers. It didn't mean nothing. It meant everything. That's why I have to go. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Then why can't everything be enough? His hand lifted, trembling, before he let it rest over hers. Warm, tender, but fading. Because the world won't let it. Because people won't understand. And because one day you'll hate me for it. She shook her head, desperate. Never. He smiled faintly, brokenly. You think that now? But love built on silence and stolen touches, it doesn't survive. It burns too bright, and then it destroys everything. Her tears slipped down her cheeks. She whispered, I'd rather burn with you than freeze without you. His chest ached at her words. He wanted to stay, to forget the world, to choose her above everything. But the weight of reality pressed harder than longing. The silence that followed was unbearable. The clock ticked, her breaths trembled. His hand shook. Finally, he leaned closer, pressing his forehead gently against hers. The contact was soft, fragile, like glass about to break. I'll carry you with me, he whispered. Everywhere I go, every day. You'll always be here. He placed her hand against his chest where his heart beat strong and fast. Her lips trembled. And I'll wait for you, even if you never come back. Their eyes locked, holding everything they could never say aloud. Then, slowly, he pulled away. His footsteps echoed softly as he rose, each step heavier than the last. At the door he paused. He turned, his hand lingering on the frame, his eyes one last time drinking her in. She sat bathed in the morning light, fragile but radiant. Her, tears shining like glass. Goodbye, he said softly. She whispered back, her voice barely audible. Goodbye. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was suffocating. The ticking clock, once steady and comforting, now felt cruel. The laughter of children outside faded, replaced by the sound of her own breath, trembling, breaking. She leaned her head back, closing her eyes. The warmth of his touch still lingered on her hand, the echo of his voice still pressed against her heart. She whispered to the empty room, "You'll always be the part of me I can't let go." The house hummed faintly. The coffee pot clicked in the kitchen, though no one poured. Footsteps faded outside, growing softer, until they disappeared. And then there was nothing, only silence, heavy and endless. Yet in that silence, she held on, not to regret, not to shame, but to memory, the kind of memory that burns quietly forever.